In this video, we're going to be talking about symbiotic relationships. So we have three different kinds of symbiotic relationships. We have parasitism, commensalism, and mutualism. But first, let's talk about what symbiosis is. Symbiosis is basically the relationship between two or more different organisms where at least one organism is getting a benefit from it. So in these situations, we're going to be looking at a few examples and their definitions. First, let's start with mutualism. Mutualism is where both organisms are benefiting from each other's presence. So, for example, we have an alligator and then we have a bird. A bird, basically what the bird does is that when an alligator, when it opens its mouth, the tropical birds living there, when they're there, they actually eat all the meat on the alligator's teeth. So in this situation, the bird is getting benefit and the alligator is getting benefit from this. It's kind of like an alligator brushing their teeth, except without using a toothbrush. They're kind of going to a dentist. Another thing would be honeybee and flower. The honeybee gives this pollen to the flower, and in return they're getting nectar. And for the flower, they're getting the pollen so that they are able to produce seeds. So next, let's move on to commensalism. Commensalism is where one organism is getting a benefit, but the other organism is not getting any benefit, but they're also not getting hurt in the process. So the other organism, they're not really experiencing anything that could be potentially either good or bad to them. But the other organism is having a good is benefiting from this relationship. So, for example, a bird building a nest on a tree. So this tree, there's really nothing gonna happen to the tree if there's a nest on it. So really, it's not going to have any benefits or downsides from this, but the bird is getting a benefit from this because it's able to have its home on the tree. So this is an example of commensalism. So basically, another example is barnacles and whales. So barnacles, they actually stay on top of like the whale, and what happens is while the whale is swimming, the barnacles, when they're trying to travel from like one place to the other, they ride on top of the whale so they can move faster and faster without having themselves to swim. You can basically view this as like lazy. Okay. So for the last one, we're going to be talking about parasitism. This is basically where one organism gets a benefit, but the other organism gets hurt from this relationship or from that other organism's benefit. So we're going to be looking at a few examples. For example, let's say ticks and dogs. So dogs, they typically get ticks, and the reason why we have to remove those ticks is because the ticks, they attach to your body and they drink the blood. So basically, the dog is getting affected in a negative way, but the ticks are getting affected in a positive way. So this is an example of parasitism. This could also just basically be said for things like mosquito. You were getting affected, but the mosquito is getting a benefit. Also, the mosquito could potentially bring in like bad viruses like malaria or dengue, which can further damage you even more. So then after that, we have, it's very rare, but there's a parasite that lives in the ocean, and what this parasite does to fish is that it attaches to their tongue and it slowly builds on top of the tongue, and every single time it builds, it's taking a portion of what the fish is eating and feeds itself, so it's able to grow and grow and grow. At the same time, while it's growing on the tongue, it starts to eat the tongue for more and more space and more food. Eventually, the fish will lose a part of its tongue, and without a part of its tongue, it's slowly going to lose like its nutritions that it's supposed to get. And eventually, when the fish dies, the parasite moves to another fish. There's another one called the prey and predator relationship. This doesn't exactly correlate with symbiosis. However, it's a pretty good example when we're trying to cover these kind of things. So this typically doesn't, so this entire symbiosis relationship over here, mutualism, commensalism, parasitism, it doesn't have to necessarily be between predator and prey. But when we talk about this part over here, the predator and prey relationship, it's typically going to involve carnivorous animals eating either herbivorous animals or omnivorous animals, or omnivorous animals eating herbivorous animal or carnivorous animals, depending on it. Okay, so now let's look at this kind of relationship. When we talk about predator and prey relationships, it's like I said, it's basically between an animal eating another animal. So when this happens, if the population of like the prey is very high and the population of this is very low, the predators are going to start overeating, and this could fluctuate the population size. And eventually, the predators, which are not getting their food source from the prey that they're eating, will also have their population fluctuate. But when the prey, when their population increases again from the lack of predators and less competition, what happens is that their population size will increase again back to their original state, and the predators will start to eat more and more. So these are all different symbiotic relationships in the symbiosis process, and also we mentioned about predator and prey relationship.